Unaccustomed as I am to public speaking. Bear with me with this one because I was one of those draftees who got roped into this very late in the process. So I didn't kind of nominate, I want to do this, please, please, please. I was like, can I get out of this, please, please, please? And there I was, stuck with it. So I will try and get through this as best I can and as quickly as I can. And what I forget, you'll have to email me about and ask me, what did you forget? Council planning and waste. Here's your big problem. There's a sandwich. Councils are the filling. And in the middle part where you are, you have the responsibilities of all aspects of waste planning. You also have all the impositions on you of all aspects of waste planning, urban infill, and then you get imposed quotas, you get housing affordability issues, you get rezoning for transport, you get the pressure to pump out those DAs. Greenfield sites. Major land releases are usually outside the control of councils. Infrastructure. Well, we all love our infrastructure and we all like to be able to take our stuff somewhere, but the trouble is that high-level planning is about catchment areas, not individual councils. But the councils are usually the ones told, it's really up to you to get a tender and sort all this process out, and if you're really lucky, you can cobble together some other councils, get your tonnages up, and maybe you'll get a better deal. So this is the problem. You're in the middle, right? It's a shitty position. And the trouble when you're in a sandwich made of that stuff is you need a lot of bread, man, okay, in order to make it palatable. So the bread is everyone around you and none of them seem to be prepared to put enough of the slice to you to cope with all the shit you've got to deal with. So, your competing stakeholders. Council might have a wonderful strategy mapped out, figured out in the nth degree all of its future growth corridors and the types of businesses it's going to have, how many residents, the mud to sud ratio, all those kind of things. There's a bit of jargon for you. You're going to have your ratepayers demanding one type of system and they don't want it to change too much as long as they're always there, as long as it's always picked up, no missed services, thank you very much, why don't you do something about the litter? Developers are always there wanting to have a waste room that's the size of a broom closet in order to cope with the 500 units that they've got there. Your urban designers don't even understand there is such a thing as waste management within a building. Now, I've had to go and lecture to the Sydney School of Architecture about this and had a lot of startled faces around me finding out that there is such a thing as waste management even from their beautifully designed buildings. And I throw back to them, you build these buildings, they are multi-million-dollar, state-of-the-art, high-tech, beautiful modern designs. And out the front you put a row of 100 garbage bins. Not a sensible idea. Plan for it. Owners, corporations, of course, are always trying to wrest control back from council. They know better. Private's better than the system that the council are operating because it's just so much better, whatever. State government have got their own set of agendas that they want you to meet. Waste contractors have got a totally different set of agendas, all of which are involved the fact that they can't possibly collect from some of the things that you want to put on this ground. And your waste equipment suppliers never seem to be able to catch up with where everyone's heads are at in terms of processing waste on site and getting on with it. So the planning problem becomes you're in the middle of all this negotiation. It's a giant pile of stuff that you're having to cope with. And I feel that what we're getting is a situation where the very people, the councils who should be in charge of this situation, are having most of their powers pulled away from them. So you have no central agency that you can go to and go, or about the planning for waste, the EPA go, well, we only touch on that, it's really planning's problem. Planning go, well, we only deal with infrastructure, really, and even then we're only going to give you a zone where it might go. We're not going to be totally technology neutral, everyone. The Office of Local Government will tell you a whole bunch of things about how it's supposed to operate, but never give you any specifics on, you know, the powers that you need, and so on and so on and so on. Now, you compare managing solid waste with water waste and look at the difference in regulatory control and the amount of critical service infrastructure that's absolutely essential to delivering that properly in a high-tech modern world. I mean, high-tech for waste is kind of like, do we have some kind of ID system on the truck? And that's where we need to really take the advancement along. Who has the control? Well, up at the state government level, your SEP 65 apartment design guide seemed like a great idea, but no matter how much we fed to them, we got back a few lines about composting and a couple of things about, I was happy to see, 2 days storage of waste inside the building. That's great. But it's not enough to really put together an entire planning system throughout your DCP. And speaking of DCPs, the status got reduced to non-legal. So they're not binding, they are guidance only. That's where your negotiations start. It's not good enough because you no longer have control of making the developers provide the systems that will be there for an entire generation. The Better Design Guide, which I think is a really welcome update that's about to hit us, and we're going to be touching on today with Marcel, and I think even Andrew is going to be talking about. That's a wonderful thing to see, but again, we've got a non-binding document. Far too many shoulds and possiblies and wouldn't it be nice's in it. We need at a council level to have the power to impose the right kinds of structures into this and plan for waste. It's the proper design of a building to cope with its own waste system. We've talked about the SEP for, the other SEP, but then there's the complying and exempt development. So a whole pile of buildings that you might have had control over are gone. The missing middle is taken out and it's like they can be built provided that they comply with the council's waste code. Now, I've written codes now for 3 different councils and I would love dearly to see how many of you have a waste code that will cope with all of the required systems that you need to put in there that they're supposed to comply with, because some of those codes that I updated for people very recently were simply documents saying it would be nice if you had a waste room. We have internal to council this other issue, waste managers versus the planning units. Now, I think there's been some really excellent work done out in the Western Sydney region, and Amanda's going to talk about that later on today, so I'll leave that for them. But that's still an issue across many, many councils where the waste managers, including myself in my time as a waste manager, have gone, no, that building will not function as it's designed in a waste system. We can't allow that design to go ahead. And 2 years later, I'm out there sorting out the mess of the building that's been built, given over to private control for the waste management, and then that whole thing collapsed, and we're trying to fit trucks into places that aren't designed for council vehicles. The entire chute system's being closed off, and the pathways to get waste out of the building are going up 65-degree bloody inclines. It's just not possible. And finally, there's a little element that I always bring up when I'm doing a waste code for someone. It's like, how much control do you have over the footpath as a council? Really, you should have a major amount of control. Have you ever considered the footpath is one of your critical elements in delivering effective waste management in any of your areas? Because that's essentially one of the key components of waste management, especially in waste collection, in everywhere I go throughout New South Wales. If you want your bulky waste collected, it's usually put on the footpath. If you want your bins collected, they're put on the footpath, right? All of those areas are something that we need to really rethink about. So it's one of the issues where control is one of the key factors for council. And then who's in charge when it comes to getting this waste management done? Private waste management seems to be something that a lot of developers wanting to put up multi-high-rises go, look, we don't want a big ugly door at the front for your truck to come in. We've got no space on the front, so we'll just have a private collector do the whole thing for you and push it back to the councils. You face loss of revenue, loss of recycling, and EPA would also lose lots of data. You face continued costs, even though they're doing a private collection for your bulky, your hazardous, all the infrastructure that needs to be done for the city or the town. The Local Government Act, right, requires that you put the levy on all individual rateable lots where there's a service available. And that could conflict with some of the garbage provisions that the Owners Corporation can impose under the Strata Schemes Management Act. Our advice is that the Local Government Act and its requirement for levy comes first in every instance that we know of. That's always challengeable. There's plenty of lawyers around the place who will have a different view of all of this, but really what the precedent is what councils need to do. And if they need to imply that fee must be applied. It's legislated. It can't be written off, it can't be opted out of. So you can't, under the law, reduce your levy to 0 for those buildings. If you look at any of the guidance that's been provided by what was originally the Office of Local Government, or the Department of Local Government, they very, very specifically point that out. You can't bring it down to nothing and go, there you go, you waived. You have to impose the fee that's in your fees and charges. There's an old story about digging another hole, in that to get rid of the waste of one place, someone was told to dig a hole and push it all into there. And when they'd done that, they had this great big mound of stuff that they dug out of the hole, and they went, what do we do with that? And the answer is, dig another hole. This is the waste planning approach that we're still dealing with after many, many years of these kinds of conferences, and it's time that we really pushed hard as a local government sector to give ourselves a bit more control, and at the top a lot more guidance and a lot more specificity about how waste management is to be planned for. So there's no centralised approach yet to match up the waste catchment with the waste treatment. There's proposals and strategies come from the EPA, but really planning are supposed to do a lot of that delivery, and the Office of Local Government's got a role, etc., etc. It expands out. There's no one with that centralised control of the thing. Default planning. We don't know what is the best form of default planning for our waste management systems. Has anyone done enough research to go, that kind of system works in those particular circumstances? If you've got a vast number of multi-unit dwellings and more on the way, what is the best system? It's being left to individual councils to muddle through as best they can, and what we need is some leadership at a higher level outside councils that applies across the whole sector. So waste infrastructure itself, the planning for that outside of the building controls, is left at the low level of council's demand or market supply of technology, and there's just so few opportunities given the costs of locating these things and the number of rules and regulations. There's more rules and regulations about where you can and can't site a waste management facility than there are about what kinds of waste management infrastructure should be in a building. It seems to be just lopsided, that it's like you can't put these big buildings out there that are going to cope with the waste, but there's so many regulations around that. But inside the building, oh, well, it's just up to the designers and the council to work out. You know, everyone takes the opt-out route. So we need to be able to effectively locate and deliver that. I called it essential here, but really let's get away from all of those issues of essential and just go, it is critical. No one can operate their building or their town if they do not have a good waste management system. So one of the problems with everyone opting out and leaving it to the poor guys who are in the middle of that sandwich that I was talking about, that nasty position in the centre of, is that it's up to the skill set of councils to be equal to delivering multi-million-dollar facilities. Now, I know over my time I have learnt a great deal about multi-million-dollar waste facilities and about the skill sets of lots of my colleagues, and it's like all their best intentions and knowledge of how to make waste collections work does not usually add up to having a very, very high-level understanding of the best types of waste management facilities. That is a specialised skill set, and it takes a long time and exposure to a lot of technologies to get that. Draft in a consultant, right, and they will give you the advice that you ask for. It's the same with lawyers. Bring them in, you've got to ask the right questions to get the right answers, otherwise you'll get a different answer. And it's the same with the consultants. If you want a particular type of technology, there are a whole raft of answers you have to have already sorted out. And it's a very specialised skill set. So I'm wondering, why is this very, very high level, high cost infrastructure being devolved down to council to plan for? Local government New South Wales, what do we do about all this? Well, we're really there to advocate on behalf of the member councils. So if the member councils say don't worry about it, we don't worry about it. But in this case, of course, a lot of them say we do worry about it. The whole idea of the data, the research, the powers that control all this are all at different levels. They're outside local government sector. And what councils have is very, very limited, and in those cases are usually left at the level of like DCPs. It's a guidance thing. Everything seems to be guidance, nothing is control. We would prefer a collaborative approach from NSW where we can play an effective role by dealing with all those other stakeholders. Because you have to realise that local government New South Wales is not a terribly well-funded body. In fact, it's supported by cash-strapped regional councils. Yeah. And we are very, very careful with their money because we're a cash-strapped local government association. And so we don't have effective people in those places. We can't employ more and more and more. So we're relying on a very limited number of people to advocate in the right areas to get things done. We recognise, though, that there is a great need to get all of this out on paper and get some controls built in for the local government, because this is a generational problem. If anyone's come down to Sydney or even into the Hunter and Wollongong, the vast amount of multi-unit dwellings that are being built with probably just barely adequate, if not substandard, waste controls and waste management systems are going to be there for a long time. It's the new face of what we all live in, and we're going to be stuck with a big problem for a long time. That's the kind of problem you get when that developed picture comes to fruition. And we need to avoid that by some very, very careful things. What do we want? When do we want it? The protest starts now. Some ideas. A consistent planning code and conditions across all the development types. Effective research. It can't be done by individual councils. This is a statewide and at least an urban-wide system that needs to be researched. There are plenty of regional areas who are doing what we've done, increasing their density, and they've coped. How? We need someone to research what we can use here. We need a collaborative waste planning group, and LG and NSW will be happy to take a very strong role in that across all of those stakeholders. Waste management facility and building service infrastructure needs to be built into the waste strategy, not an afterthought or not left to some other agency. It needs to be part of the strategy. You're going to deliver resource recovery, it starts at everyone's home. We need a fund that really puts the right New South Wales government officers who know what they're doing and are keen into a position where they are advising and learning. We need grants as part of that Waste Less, Recycle More that are then going to fund and support new technologies that will help enhance resource recovery in high density developments. And finally, as a little afterthought, the Office of Local Government needs to update its guidelines on how you work out your domestic waste charges as part and parcel of all of this planning, because it's getting a bit old and it was written for a vastly different set of circumstances. I think that's it.